At a family party, my wife mocked my job. She didn't realize my company was worth $15 million. Dreams are strange things. They start as whispers in your mind, grow into persistent thoughts, and eventually become the compass that guides your life. My dream began in college, a simple idea that kept me awake at night, to build something that would change the way people connect. I remember the exact moment it crystallized. Daniel and I were sitting on the floor of our dorm room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and energy drink cans, our laptops balanced precariously on our knees. It was 3 a.m., and we'd been coding for 18 hours straight. What if we built it from scratch? I said, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. Not just another app, a whole new system. Daniel looked up from his screen, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light. That would take years, Ethan. I know, I replied. But imagine if we did it. That was 7 years ago. Before the cramped apartment. Before the ramen dinners. Before Claire. I met Claire at a friend's wedding. She stood out immediately, tall, elegant, with a laugh that made people turn their heads. When our eyes met across the reception hall, something clicked. I wasn't supposed to believe in love at first sight, but there it was, hitting me square in the chest. So what do you do? She asked over champagne, her eyes curious and bright. I'm in tech, I said vaguely, not wanting to dive into the mess that was our struggling startup. At that point, Daniel and I were still working out of my apartment, subsisting on cheap coffee and sheer determination. Interesting, she replied, but I could see she was waiting for more, a title, a company name, some indication of success or status. I changed the subject, asking about her work as an architect at a prestigious firm. Her eyes lit up as she talked about her projects, her ambitions. I was captivated. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. Our relationship moved quickly. Too quickly, perhaps. Within 6 months, I was down on one knee, offering her a ring I could barely afford. I was in love, deeply, irrationally in love, and she said yes. It was around the same time that our company started showing the first signs of life. After 2 years of setbacks and failures, we'd finally created something that worked. Our beta tests were promising. Investors were starting to take notice. And then came the first major meeting with a potential investor, a venture capitalist who could change everything for us. Daniel and I prepared for weeks. The night before, I couldn't sleep, running through our pitch over and over. The morning of the meeting, I received a call from Claire. Her voice was shaking. My father's in the hospital, she said. They think it might be a heart attack. I need you here. There was no question, no hesitation. Text me the hospital. I'm on my way. I called Daniel from the car. I can't make it, I explained, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Family emergency. There was a pause, and I could feel his disappointment through the phone. This is our shot, Ethan. I know. I'm sorry. You'll have to do it without me. What if I reschedule? We can't risk it. You know how these guys are, they'll move on to the next thing. You can do this, Daniel. You know the pitch as well as I do. Another pause. Okay. I'll call you after. At the hospital, I held Claire's hand for hours as we waited for news. Her father was stable, thankfully, not a heart attack, but a severe angina attack. The relief on her face was worth missing 100 meetings. But when I checked my phone later that evening, there were 5 missed calls from Daniel. I stepped out into the hospital corridor to return them. We got it! He practically shouted when he picked up. They're in for $2 million. $2 million, Ethan! The corridor seemed to spin around me. That's incredible. You should have seen their faces when I showed them the demo. They couldn't believe what we'd built. One of them actually said, "This changes everything." I leaned against the wall, a mix of emotions washing over me, pride, excitement, and a strange sense of disconnect. This was our moment, the one we'd been working toward for years, and I wasn't there to see it. There's something else, Daniel continued, his voice dropping slightly. They kept asking about the team. Who built the core system? I told them it was a collaborative effort, but they were really impressed with the architecture. They specifically asked who designed it. I knew where this was going. And what did you say? I told them I did. The words hung in the air between us. I didn't plan to take credit. He rushed on. It just happened. They were asking technical questions, and I was answering them, and they assumed. I didn't correct them. I closed my eyes. The core system, my baby, the thing I'd poured my soul into for 3 years. And now, in the official record, it would be Daniel's creation. I should have been angry. I had every right to be. But as I looked through the door's window at Claire, sitting beside her father's bed, I made a decision. It's fine, I said quietly. Really? You closed the deal. That's what matters. We can clarify things later, Daniel offered. Once we're established. No, I said, surprising myself with how certain I felt. Let's keep it this way. What? Why? I watched Claire through the glass. I just got engaged. Claire, she hates attention. Comes from a private family. The spotlight, the press, she'd hate all of that. And honestly, I don't need my name in the tech blogs. I just want to build things. Are you sure? Daniel sounded skeptical. This is a big deal, Ethan. I'm sure. Officially, I'll be a consultant. Behind the scenes, nothing changes. I'll still build what I want to build. You handle the public side. That night, after Claire had fallen asleep in the chair beside her father's hospital bed, I thought about what I'd just done. I'd given away recognition for my greatest achievement. But watching Claire's peaceful face, I convinced myself it was worth it. A month later, we were married in a small ceremony. By then, our company had proper offices, and Daniel was being interviewed by tech magazines as the visionary founder. I attended the office meetings, built the products, but stayed in the background. To the outside world, I was just another employee. When Claire asked about my work, I kept it vague. Just helping out with Daniel's startup, I'd say. Consulting work, mostly coding. She never pressed for details, and I never offered them. Maybe she thought I was embarrassed by my modest position. Maybe she was focused on her own career, which was taking off at the architecture firm. Or maybe, in a way I couldn't admit to myself yet, I was afraid of what would happen if she knew the truth. So began the years of half-truths and omissions. The years of being the man behind the curtain, building an empire from the shadows while pretending to be nothing more than a freelancer who worked from home. It was a sacrifice I made willingly. At the time, it seemed like a small price to pay for the life I wanted, a life with Claire. I couldn't have known how that sacrifice would grow over the years, how it would twist and change, until it became something I hardly recognized. Until it became the thing that would make my own wife look at me with pity. It's strange how small compromises grow over time, like weeds that start as barely visible sprouts until one day you look up and your entire garden is overrun. My decision to downplay my role in the company was such a compromise. In the beginning, Claire's misconception about my work seemed harmless. When she'd mention my job to friends, she'd say, "Ethan helps with a friend's tech business," with a kind of dismissive wave that suggested it was temporary, something I did between real jobs. I never corrected her. 2 years into our marriage, our company secured its first major client. That night, I came home late, buzzing with excitement I could barely contain. "We landed Meridian Tech," I told Claire as I loosened my tie. "It's a game changer for us." She looked up from her laptop, where she was finalizing designs for a downtown high-rise. "That's nice," she said, her attention already drifting back to her work. "What exactly did you do for them again?" I hesitated. "Just some back-end development stuff." The words tasted bitter, a lie by omission. What I'd actually done was redesign their entire data processing system, a breakthrough that would eventually become our company's signature product. Claire nodded absently. "Well, I'm glad Daniel's company is doing well." Daniel's company. Not ours. Not mine. The correction died in my throat. It became a pattern. The more successful we became, the more Claire seemed to view my work as some quaint hobby, something I dabbled in while she pursued a serious career. She came from a family where profession defined worth. Her father was a renowned surgeon, her mother a federal judge, her brother a corporate lawyer at one of New York's top firms. Next to them, what was I? Just a guy who helped out with a startup. "You're still doing that tech thing?" became her standard question whenever someone asked about my work at social gatherings. She'd ask it with that slight smirk, the one that made me feel like I was a child showing off a crayon drawing in a gallery of masterpieces. I didn't mind at first. Or maybe I did, but I buried it deep, convinced that my silence was protecting our marriage. Claire valued prestige, and I had deliberately hidden mine. It was a trap of my own making. The first time her dismissal truly stung was at her brother Mark's promotion party. I stood in a corner, nursing a scotch I didn't want, while Claire circulated among her family's friends, all titans of industry or partners at prestigious firms. "And what do you do, Ethan?" asked one of Mark's colleagues, a sharp-suited man with calculating eyes. Before I could answer, Claire appeared at my side. "He's a freelancer," she said, her tone suggesting it was the polite way of saying unemployed. "He works from home. In fact, sometimes he doesn't even change out of his pajamas all day." She laughed, and the man joined in, though his eyes held a new kind of pity. That night, I lay awake beside Claire, wondering if I should finally tell her the truth. Our company was now valued at over $8 million. I owned 30%. I wasn't just some code monkey. I was the architect of systems used by Fortune 500 companies. But I said nothing. The lie had gone on too long. How could I explain that I'd hidden my success from her for years? What would that reveal about our marriage, about the way I thought she would react? As our 5th anniversary approached, the disparity between my actual career and what Claire believed grew even wider. At her family dinners, I'd sit silently while her cousins, junior analysts and associate attorneys, talked knowingly about startups they'd invested in, meaning they'd bought a few shares of public tech companies. "You should talk to Ethan," Claire would say with that same patronizing tone. "He does something with computers too." Each time, I'd smile and nod, playing the role of the underachieving husband. Meanwhile, our company had expanded to 3 international offices. My personal net worth, on paper at least, had crossed into 8 figures. Daniel would occasionally ask, "When are you going to tell her?" And I'd always respond, "Soon," knowing it was a lie. The breaking point came gradually. Claire's comments shifted from gently patronizing to openly dismissive. "Maybe we could afford that if you had a real job," she'd say when we discussed vacation plans, unaware that I could buy the resort we were considering without blinking. I started to wonder if Claire had married the person she thought I could become, rather than the person I was. And worse, I began to question whether I'd fallen in love with who she was, or who I imagined her to be. One evening, as we dressed for yet another family function, Claire handed me a tie I hated. "Wear this one," she said. "It looks more professional." "Does it matter?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. She paused, studying me with surprise. "Of course it matters. My father's colleagues will be there. People who could help your career, if you ever decide to get serious about having one." I put on the tie and said nothing. But something in me had finally cracked, a hairline fracture in the foundation of my silence. I just didn't know that the whole structure was about to come crashing down. Claire's parents' annual summer gathering was legendary in their social circle, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and achievement. Their sprawling Connecticut estate, with its manicured gardens and Olympic-sized pool, served as the perfect backdrop for the parade of accomplishments that would unfold there. I'd attended these parties for years, always with a sense of dread. This year was no different as I buttoned up my light blue shirt, no tie, despite Claire's disapproving glance. "Everyone else will be dressed properly," she said, adjusting her pearl necklace in the mirror. "I'll be comfortable," I replied, rolling up my sleeves. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt necessary. Claire's expression tightened. Just try not to embarrass me. We arrived as the party was in full swing. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and the sound of string quartet music drifted across the lawn. Claire immediately spotted her cousin Philip, now a junior partner at Goldman Sachs, and steered us in his direction. "Claire!" Philip embraced her warmly before turning to me with considerably less enthusiasm. "And Eric, right?" "Ethan," I corrected, not for the first time. Right. Sorry about that." He didn't sound sorry at all. "What is it you do again?" Before I could answer, Claire jumped in. "Ethan works from home. In his pajamas most days." She laughed, and Philip joined in, exchanging knowing glances. "Must be nice," he said with thinly veiled condescension. "While the rest of us are slaving away at actual careers." I smiled tightly. It has its moments. As we mingled, I became Claire's punchline. To her aunt, "Ethan's still doing that computer thing." To her former classmate, "He helps his friend's company sometimes, when he's not playing video games." Each comment delivered with that same smile, that same dismissive tone. By dinner, served on the vast terrace overlooking the gardens, something had hardened inside me. 6 years of playing small, of letting Claire believe I was less than I was, it was wearing thin. We were seated at a table with Claire's brother Mark, his wife, and 2 other couples, all successful professionals with impressive titles. The conversation predictably turned to work. "We just closed a deal with Vertex Systems," said one man, a commercial real estate developer. "Completely revolutionizing their office spaces worldwide." "Vertex?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "Impressive client." I took a sip of wine, saying nothing. Our company had designed Vertex's entire internal communication framework. The project had taken me 8 months of late nights and endless code revisions. "What about you, Ethan?" asked the developer's wife, perhaps out of politeness or pity. "Claire mentioned you work in tech?" I opened my mouth, but Claire cut in. "Oh, he tinkers with websites and things." She patted my hand like I was a child. "Maybe one day my husband will have a real job." The table erupted in laughter, polite, condescending laughter that burned in my ears. I felt something crack inside me, a dam breaking after years of pressure. I set down my wine glass with forced calm. "Actually, But my response was cut short by a commotion near the entrance to the terrace. Heads turned, conversations paused. Claire's father was welcoming someone important, judging by the murmurs sweeping through the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," her father announced, "we have a special guest joining us tonight." And there, shaking hands with Claire's father, was Daniel. My heart stopped. Daniel had never attended one of these parties before. We'd kept our worlds carefully separated. Yet there he was, in an impeccably tailored suit, looking every bit the successful CEO that he was. "Daniel, right?" Claire's father continued. "CEO of Nexus Technologies." I froze. Claire's cousin Philip practically leapt from his chair. "Mr. Wright. It's an honor, sir. We've been following your company's growth with great interest." Daniel smiled, scanning the crowd, until his eyes locked with mine. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something else. Understanding. Amusement. "Thank you all for the warm welcome," he said, his voice carrying across the terrace. "Philip here has been trying to arrange a meeting for months. When he mentioned this gathering, I thought it was the perfect opportunity." Claire leaned over to me. "That's the Daniel you work with? Why didn't you tell me he was coming?" "I didn't know," I whispered back, a sense of impending doom washing over me. Daniel accepted a glass of champagne from a server. "Actually, I have an announcement to make. One that I'd been keeping under wraps until now." The crowd hushed in anticipation. After nearly 7 years of building Nexus Technologies from nothing into a company valued at $15 million, I've decided it's time for a change. Claire squeezed my arm. "$15 million?" she whispered incredulously. Daniel raised his glass. "I'm stepping down as CEO." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Philip looked like he'd been slapped. "But that's not why I'm really here tonight," Daniel continued, his eyes finding mine again. I'm here to introduce someone. Someone very special to our company. My stomach dropped. This was it. The moment I'd both feared and secretly longed for. The man behind the curtain for too long, Daniel said, walking toward our table. My best friend. My co-founder. Time seemed to slow as Daniel made his way toward our table. The clink of silverware against china ceased. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes tracked his movement across the terrace. In that moment, I considered making a run for it. I could excuse myself to the bathroom, slip out through the kitchen, and be halfway down the driveway before anyone noticed. But something kept me rooted to my chair, perhaps the weight of 6 years of silence, or maybe just simple exhaustion from maintaining the facade. Claire gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Why is he coming this way? She whispered urgently. Do you think he remembers you from the office? I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up. Daniel stopped directly in front of me, champagne glass still raised. He looked different than he had that morning in our weekly strategy meeting, more commanding somehow. This was Daniel the CEO, the public face of our company, the man who graced magazine covers and gave TED Talks. Ladies and gentlemen, he continued, his voice carrying easily across the now silent terrace. In business, we often talk about visionaries, the people who see what others can't. But sometimes, the true visionaries prefer to work in the shadows. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my back despite the evening breeze. 7 years ago, in a cramped apartment with barely enough money for rent, 2 college friends started a company. Daniel's eyes found mine, a silent question in them. Are you ready for this? I gave him the slightest nod. It was too late to turn back now. One of those friends became the face of the company. That would be me. Daniel smiled as a ripple of polite laughter spread through the crowd. The other friend built the actual product. The system. The thing that made us worth $15 million. Claire's grip on my arm loosened. I could feel her confusion without looking at her. For personal reasons, he chose to remain in the background. To let me be the frontman while he was the genius behind the scenes. Daniel extended his hand toward me. Please welcome the real architect of Nexus Technologies. My best friend. My co-founder. The new CEO, Ethan Taylor. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the distant hum of cicadas in the garden, the gentle splash of the fountain. Then came the murmurs, growing louder as realization spread through the crowd. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. Claire's hand fell away from my arm. Thank you, Daniel, I managed to say, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. From the corner of my eye, I could see Claire's face. The color had drained from it completely. Her mouth hung slightly open, her eyes wide with shock. She looked like someone had just told her the earth was flat, and had evidence to prove it. Philip, who had been mid-sip when the announcement came, choked on his champagne. Her brother Mark stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. As Daniel mentioned, I continued, finding strength in the moment of truth. I've been fortunate to work behind the scenes, building the core technologies that power Nexus. And yes, I often did it in my pajamas. A ripple of laughter, more genuine this time. My phone buzzed in my pocket, once, twice, then continuously. News traveled fast in the tech world. Daniel's announcement was already making waves beyond this terrace. I'm honored to step into the role of CEO, I said, accepting the champagne glass someone handed me. And I look forward to leading Nexus into its next chapter. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then building. Claire's father was the first to reach me, his handshake firm, his eyes reassessing. Well, this is quite a surprise, Ethan, he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. Why didn't you tell us? I smiled politely. It never came up. The next half hour passed in a blur of congratulations and business cards. Investors who had ignored me earlier now pressed their contact information into my hands. Claire's cousins hovered nearby, trying to catch my attention. Through it all, Claire remained seated, still as a statue. When I finally made my way back to her, The table had emptied, everyone else having joined the crowd around Daniel and me. "Claire," I said softly, sitting beside her. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with emotions I couldn't quite read: confusion, embarrassment, anger, hurt. $15 million, she whispered. "The valuation came in last month," I replied. "All this time, when I was..." She couldn't finish the sentence. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down to see an email from our lead investor. "Congratulations on the promotion. Let's talk tomorrow about the IPO timeline." When I looked up, Claire was staring at me with new eyes, a stranger trying to reconcile the husband she thought she knew with the man now being celebrated around her. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me?" It was the question I'd been dreading for years. And now that it was here, I realized I didn't have a good answer. "Why?" Claire repeated, her question hanging between us like a fragile, dangerous thing. Before I could answer, Philip appeared at our table, his earlier condescension replaced with obsequious enthusiasm. "Ethan! I had no idea," he gushed, clapping me on the shoulder as if we were old friends. "Listen, I've got some ideas for potential partnerships. Maybe we could grab lunch next week?" I nodded politely. "Have your assistant call mine." The words felt strange in my mouth, foreign yet satisfying. For years, I'd bitten back such responses, played the role of the underachieving husband. Now, the truth was out, and there was a certain liberation in no longer hiding. Philip beamed, oblivious to the tension between Claire and me. "Absolutely. And bring Claire, of course. We should celebrate." As he walked away, Claire stood abruptly. "I need some air," she said, her voice brittle. I followed her through the French doors and into the garden, away from the buzzing crowd. The string quartet had resumed playing, but the music seemed distant and distorted now, like it was coming from underwater. In the soft glow of the garden lights, Claire looked both beautiful and fragile. She stopped by a stone bench and turned to face me, arms crossed protectively over her chest. 6 years? She said, each word precise and measured. "For 6 years I thought you were just tinkering. A freelancer. Someone who got lucky enough to work remotely for a friend's company." "I never actually lied," I said weakly. "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't insult me by splitting hairs. You deliberately let me believe you were something you weren't." A waiter passed nearby with a tray of champagne. Claire grabbed a glass and drained half of it in one swallow. "Do you have any idea how I feel right now?" she continued, her composure slipping. "Everyone in there, my family, my friends, they all heard me mock your job." "Mock you?" "For years. And now..." She gestured helplessly toward the terrace, where people were still clustered around Daniel, no doubt pumping him for information about the company's future. "Now they know I had no idea who my own husband really is." The truth of her words hit me hard. In my effort to avoid the spotlight, to keep our lives normal, I'd created a gulf between us that now seemed impossible to bridge. "I thought I was protecting you," I said. "You always said you hated attention, the spotlight. When things started taking off, it seemed easier to just let Daniel be the face of everything." "That wasn't your decision to make for me," Claire replied, her voice low but intense. "Did you think so little of me? That I couldn't handle being married to a successful man?" I had no good answer for that. Had I really been protecting her? Or had I been protecting myself, from having to reconcile the Claire I loved with the Claire who measured people by their titles and bank accounts? "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Maybe I was afraid." "Of what?" "That you wouldn't see me the same way if you knew. That you'd expect different things. That I'd become just another achievement in your family's collection." Claire's laugh was hollow. "Well, congratulations. Instead, I became the joke of the evening, the clueless wife who mocked her millionaire husband." A champagne glass shattered somewhere on the terrace, followed by embarrassed laughter. The party continued, oblivious to our quiet unraveling in the garden. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. "Do you even want this?" Claire asked suddenly. The CEO position, the spotlight, is that what you've been secretly craving all along? The question caught me off guard. I want to build things, I said after a moment. I always have. The title, the money, that's just a means to an end. What end? Freedom. The chance to create without limitations. Claire's expression softened slightly, a glimpse of the woman I'd fallen in love with. You could have told me that. I would have understood that. Would you? I couldn't keep the doubt from my voice. She looked away, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Of all the times she'd dismissed my work, the subtle comparisons to her family's prestigious careers, the implicit hierarchy she'd created where I always ranked at the bottom. I don't know, she admitted finally, echoing my words from moments earlier. I'd like to think so, but I don't know. At least it was honest. That was something. The garden lights caught the tears welling in her eyes, turning them to liquid gold. For a moment neither of us spoke. The weight of 6 years of misunderstandings and assumptions hung between us, too heavy to simply brush aside. From the terrace, I heard someone call my name. The real world, my new reality, was waiting. We should go back, Claire said, wiping at her eyes. They'll be wondering where the guest of honor is. Claire, we need to talk about this. Yes, she agreed, her composure returning like a mask sliding into place. But not here. Not now. As we walked back toward the light and noise of the party, Claire kept a careful distance between us. When we reached the doors, she paused. I don't even know what to call you now, she said quietly. My husband the CEO? My husband the millionaire? I took her hand gently. Just Ethan. I'm still just Ethan. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Not anymore. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes, business cards, and congratulations. Claire remained by my side, the perfect picture of a supportive spouse, smiling, nodding, her hand occasionally touching my arm in a practiced display of intimacy. But I felt the distance between us growing with each passing minute, a chasm widening beneath the polite facade. Her father cornered me by the bar, his earlier patronizing manner replaced with an almost desperate eagerness. Ethan, my boy, we should talk about that downtown development project. Perhaps Nexus Technologies would be interested in handling the smart building systems? Send the proposal to my office, I replied, the words still feeling surreal on my tongue. My office. After years of working from our spare bedroom, I now had a corner office on the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise. Mark approached next, offering a glass of 18-year-old scotch. To my brilliant brother-in-law, he toasted, his eyes calculating. We should have lunch soon. Just the two of us. I accepted the drink but made no promises. By midnight the party had thinned. Daniel had left an hour earlier, citing an early morning flight. As we said goodbye, he hugged me tightly. Sorry for the ambush, he whispered. But it was time, Ethan. You built this. You deserve the recognition. I wasn't sure if I agreed, but I thanked him anyway. The drive home was silent. Claire stared out the passenger window, her reflection in the glass unreadable. When we finally arrived at our modest suburban house, a house I'd chosen despite being able to afford something much grander, she kicked off her heels in the entryway and headed straight for the bedroom. I followed, loosening my tie. Claire, we need to talk about this. She sat at her vanity, methodically removing her earrings. What is there to say? You've been lying to me for our entire marriage. I never lied. Stop. She turned to face me, her eyes hard. Lying by omission is still lying, Ethan. You let me believe you were something you're not. Or maybe, I said quietly, you believed what you wanted to believe. The words hung in the air between us. Claire's face flushed. What is that supposed to mean? I sat on the edge of our bed, suddenly exhausted. You never asked, Claire? Not once in 6 years did you ask me what I actually did at the company. You never wanted to see our offices. You never showed any interest in my work. Because I thought you were just a nobody? I finished for her. Just the guy who works from home in his pajamas? That was convenient for you, wasn't it? Having a husband who was safely tucked away at the bottom of your family's success hierarchy? Claire flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Isn't it? I ran a hand through my hair. Tonight, when everyone found out what I really am, what I've built, I saw something in your eyes, Claire. It wasn't just surprise. It was recalculation. She stood up abruptly. I'm going to sleep in the guest room. Running away won't solve this. I'm not running away, she said, her voice trembling. I just don't know who you are anymore. After she left, I sat alone in our bedroom, my phone still buzzing with notifications. Congratulatory texts. Meeting requests. Interview opportunities. The world was suddenly beating a path to my door, eager for a piece of the man behind the curtain. I turned off my phone and changed into my pajamas, the same ones Claire had mocked at countless family gatherings. Then I laid down on my side of our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Around 3 a.m, I heard the door open. Claire's footsteps, hesitant on the carpet. The mattress dipped as she sat on her side of the bed. I couldn't sleep, she said softly. Me either. A long silence stretched between us. Then, why didn't you tell me, Ethan? The real reason? I considered deflecting, giving her the same half-truths I'd been telling myself for years. But I was tired of hiding. Because I was afraid you wouldn't love me if I wasn't the underdog, I admitted. The way you talked about successful men, your father, your brother, even your ex-boyfriends, there was always this contempt mixed with the admiration. Like they were necessary evils in your world. I didn't want to be that. Claire was quiet for so long I thought she might have fallen asleep. Then I felt her hand find mine in the darkness. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never realized. I made you feel that way. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. We have a lot to figure out, I said. Yes, she agreed. We do. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years, not because of the money or the title, but because I no longer had to hide who I really was. The respect from Claire's family, from her friends, from the business world, I'd never asked for any of it. But there was a kind of freedom in being seen, finally, for what I'd built. And as Claire's hand remained in mine until morning, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see me too. Not the CEO. Not the millionaire. Just Ethan, the man who had always been there, waiting to be discovered.